Today we're talking about the mythology of Robin Hood. This one's my favorite, but we'll get to him later. Robin Hood is a hero from English folklore, an outlaw hero, usually depicted as a highly skilled archer or swordsman, or both. His story sometimes is said to take place during the Crusades, sometimes not. In the oldest versions, he's a yeoman, basically a middle-class medieval land worker, but in later versions, he is a nobleman. Traditionally, he is depicted in a color called Lincoln green. It's the color of dyed woolen cloth from the town of Lincoln, England in the Middle Ages. They basically over-dyed blue wool with yellow and came up with this signature color. And it's been associated with Robin Hood and his merry men since the 1500s. There's an old ballad that goes, "He clothed his men in Lincoln green, himself in scarlet red." But we always see him in green now. Anyway, there is no canon version of Robin Hood. There's no original story to be found. I'll go through the earliest stories and how they changed, but basically today he is understood as someone who's famous for robbing the rich to give to the poor. A good outlaw with a heart of gold. This stealing from the rich to give to the poor and the way he supposedly lives with his merry men out in Sherwood Forest is very socialist. In fact, in 1953, during the McCarthy era in Indiana, Robin Hood books were banned as being communist. The first written reference we have to a Robin Hood is a poem from the 1300s. Then later in 1405, this one friar wrote that there were people who would rather listen to tales and songs of Robin Hood than attend mass. So we know people are telling stories at that time period, and that they'd rather do it than attend mass. Narrative ballads about Robin Hood start showing up in the 1500s. He has a specific devotion to the Virgin Mary, which some people think is where Maid Marian came from, but we'll get to her. His skills as an archer and his opposition to a person called the Sheriff of Nottingham. This character is the antagonist who often shows up to oppose Robin Hood. He's portrayed as an unjust tyrant who overtaxes the people, makes them live in poverty, and is the reason Robin has to steal from the rich to give to the poor. He's portrayed as greedy and selfish, and later as someone who has a lecherous desire for Maid Marian. Never played better by anyone except Alan Rickman in Prince of Thieves. I will die on that hill. It's a 1991 movie with Kevin Costner. Literally, Alan Rickman is a delight and the best part about the movie. Now, in that movie, Robin Hood is depicted as being alive during the Crusades. It starts with him in the Crusades where he meets Morgan Freeman and then they start traveling together, which leads to another antagonist, which is Prince John. Now, John was King of England from 1199 until he died in 1216. He was the youngest son of his father, Henry II, but became his father's favorite after his three older brothers revolted against his father. But eventually Henry made peace with them. His brother Richard Lionheart, Richard I, inherited the crown. In a lot of these stories, he's king while Richard is fighting in the Crusades, but that's not actually what happened. He became king after Richard died. The reason we associate him as a villain with Robin Hood is mostly because of a book by Sir Walter Scott called Ivanhoe. In fact, most of our ideas about Robin Hood in contemporary culture come from Ivanhoe. The name Locksley, like Robin of Locksley, comes from Ivanhoe. Most of his character traits, like being kind of mischievous and charming, they come from Ivanhoe. The whole idea that he once split an enemy's arrow in an archery contest, that comes from Ivanhoe too. Shakespeare also made many references to Robin Hood. In Two Gentlemen of Verona, the students up in the forest meets these outlaws who say, "By the bare scalp of Robin Hood's fat friar." In As You Like It, men who live in the forest of Arden are described as living like the old Robin Hood of England. And in Henry IV, Falstaff refers to Maid Marian, implying that the name is like a euphemism for an unchaste woman. Now, movies about Robin Hood really cemented the narrative of his story and how we think of him. This is Douglas Fairbanks in the 1922 silent version that cemented his outfit, his attitude, his archery, the tights. But one of the most long-lasting is Errol Flynn's portrayal of Robin Hood in 1938 in The Adventures of Robin Hood with Olivia de Havilland, who plays Maid Marian. The other characters as we know them and their character traits really are developed in this movie. And this movie heavily influenced the Disney movie from 1973. If you're a millennial like me, or maybe even Gen X, you may have grown up attracted to this fox. I know it's not just me. Now, the reason he's a fox is because Disney originally wanted to do a different story. They wanted to make a movie about the 12th century legend of Reynard the Fox. He was a trickster character who could be kind of not suitable for children, so that idea was scrapped. Later, when someone pitched the idea of them doing Robin Hood, they're like, oh, let's do the fox thing, but with that. Originally, they wanted to set it in the American South to kind of be like the Song of the South, which had come out previously. But because of the racial controversy around Song of the South, which there was controversy from the start in the 40s, they were like, nah, let's just keep it in England. Now, one of the coolest characters in Robin Hood is Maid Marian, who I know looks kind of weird here, but this is one of the oldest renderings of her from the 17th century. Marian isn't in the earliest Robin Hood stories and may have started as a character from May Games festivities. May Day is a long-held tradition that's halfway between the equinox and the solstice. In the 15th century, both a Robin and Marian character were associated with May Day festivities. People also think the idea of Marian, like I mentioned earlier, may have come from the Virgin Mary. But as a May Day character, she exemplifies the opposite of that. Like a wild pagan shepherdess with sexuality, no regard for social rules. There's one play from the 16th century where Robin says she's a troll of trust, to serve a friar at his lust, a pricker, a prancer, a terror of sheets, a wagger of bollocks when other men sleep. However, in other plays a little bit later, she appears as Robin Hood's legal wife, but she lives with him in the forest and lives part of that equal, free, not part of society. Later stories like to change her to a noble woman, especially the ones where Robin is a noble man. And in the Victorian era and in the silent movie and like the movie with Olivia de Havilland in 1938, she is an upper class woman who has a wild, strong heart, but is being pursued by the evil sheriff of Nottingham, kind of a damsel who needs rescuing, but in those stories, she usually comes out strong on her own as well. There are some modern books that reimagine her as a woman who runs away from her highborn birth to go live how she wants in the forest, sometimes disguising herself as a man. They're really cool twists on the story, and I honestly want to see more of them. Check out the strong women in my book, Dust Spells, which is a reimagining of a Brothers Grimm fairy tale, The 12 Dancing Princesses. My podcast, Folktales and Fairy Lore, link is in the bio. And go write some more twists on this story. I think we can use more about wealth distribution and beautiful men in green. I also have this purse. I got it at Hot Topic. It's awesome.